So we're going to have a look at the hip extension assessment. So what I want to look for when I look at hip extension is to see how much the hip is moving forward and how much the hip is rotating. So we get both rotation and translation of the pelvis. So as we looked at in the course, what we want to do is put ourselves in a functional position. So first of all, I'm going to turn around. So I always use the wall for this assessment for two reasons. One being so that I can reach back and get a measure. The other reason is so that when someone reaches back, they've got the safety of having to fall back into the wall if they need to be. If you did it out in the middle of the room, it might change the test results as people aren't so confident of being able to reach back. And as we know from our talks of neuroscience, the kind of threat level goes up and it might change the way we move and skew the test. So first thing that we want to do is get in a nice stride stance. So remember when we look at extension, it's always kind of that back leg positioning game. But what we want to try and do is isolate out this leg as much as possible, because I really want to know what I'm able to do with the emphasis being on the test leg. So what we want to do is put our foot forward and have a little toe touch on the floor, as you can see there. So I'm just having a toe touch. Now with the toe touch, what I'm not doing is I'm not leaning too heavily onto the toe. And the other thing that I'm not doing is taking my toe too far out in front. Because if I take my toe too far out in front, I'm going to pull myself into a hip extended position. Obviously I'm looking at hip extension. If I pull my hip into an extended position already, there's not going to be a lot of movement to see. So we want a light toe touch, my leg in front to create that kind of hip extended position, but also not so extended that I skew the test and I can't move. So all that we're going to do is I'm going to put my arms up in the air, so that what we're looking for is, as I reach back, is that I'm looking for kind of a smooth movement of my pelvis forward. The pelvis is allowed to translate. So when we're looking at functional assessment, a lot of what we're looking for is my ability to move my centre of mass or translate my centre of mass forward. When I can't translate my centre of mass forward, I generally tend to find that it's because my body's trying to stop it from moving. So that's part and parcel of what we're trying to do. If it doesn't move forward, then that probably means my body doesn't want to do it very effectively. So a key component of this is seeing, as I reach my arms back, does my pelvis shift forward? To some degree, we're also assessing the compensations that happen elsewhere in the body. Obviously, in a functional chain of movement, if my pelvis can't move forward, I'm very likely to see a compensation somewhere else in the system. So I might see more movement coming out of, say, my lumbar spine or my thoracic spine. I might see more movement coming out of my knee. I might see more movement coming from various different places in the body. Generally, we tend to see most motion coming from the lumbar or from the knee. So it's always a task-orientated situation. My body will find a way to achieve the task, and it does it through the path of least resistance. That might be both structurally or in terms of motor patterns. So what I'm looking to do is reach my arms up in the air, and I just want to see how well I can reach back, and how well does my hip extend forward. So for me, I could probably go a little bit further. Now I can go there, and that's starting to reach the limit of what I'm able to do. Now I'm going to give you a quick demonstration of things that you might see. So things that you might see are where the hip stays and you just see it all coming out of the lumbar spine. If you can see there, I've kind of immobilised my hip. And when that hip doesn't move, we see a lot of it coming out of the lumbar spine. Another thing that we tend to see is from the knee. So that what we do is when we are going into hip extension, if we're kind of a knee dominant as the hip doesn't move, we tend to kind of bend the knee and use that. So rather than the hips extend, we use a bending of the knee. I'll show you that one more time for the camera. You can see there that I'm using my knee to bend. The hip isn't really extending, but the knee is bending and allowing me to get through that global motion. Okay, so they're the kind of things that we're looking out for. Very important to assess what's happening in the movement of the hip. Very important to assess what's happening at the knee, what's happening at the hip. If you see some instability at somewhere like the foot, it's definitely worth going and having another look at these other areas as well. Any compensation you see, it's always worth saying, well, those areas are points that I'd probably want to look at as well. So all movement is information, and we're constantly assessing and evolving that information into understanding our clients better. But for the sake of this test, we want to see that hip smoothly moving forward. If it's not, are we seeing it from other places? And again, the add-on to this test, or the evolution or the progression, is coming up onto the single leg. So does that movement get better or get worse? Obviously with me I fell over and it obviously got worse. But does that movement get better or get worse? As I'm moving through my hip on a single leg, am I able to move better or am I able to move worse? Remember, when we take the demand up, is my body still capable of doing it? How much of gait, how much of running is on a single leg? 55 to 80%, depending on who you read. So single leg assessment is always really, really important. So that's our hip extension test.